Hello, everyone. I've titled this particular video, Why Prophecy Fails. And by that, I mean Bible prophecy, biblical prophecies, Hebrew Bible or Old Testament, New Testament. Why do they fail? Now, on the internet, in particular, YouTube, that's where we are here. If you dare type in as a search term, Bible prophecy, end of the age, what does the Bible say about the end? Just so you have the word end, Bible, and prophecy, boy, it'll be hundreds of thousands of videos and all sorts of programs on that subject. Most of those are from people who have their own take on Bible prophecy. They think they know something about interpreting it and telling you something maybe about the end of the age. There are also some academics, people in my field, that lecture on apocalypticism and Bible prophecy and even Jesus and early Christianity. And their approach would tend to be more when prophecy fails. And one of the great interests that many of us have had who've worked in this field is how does a group cope with failure when all of their expectations about the end arriving and maybe their participation in the final events of the end, when that all falls apart, when it doesn't happen. That's more of a historical, psychological, sociological question, well worth exploring. And I have explored it in quite a few books and videos and articles that I've written over the years. But why prophecy fails is a little bit of a different focus. And let me explain more about that to you. I've got notes that I made here. I got some pretty exciting things to tell you about that relate to this new series as we go. So let me share my screen and we'll get right into it. If you type into a search engine, I use Google here, when prophecy fails, which is the phrase you usually hear in the academic world, you're going to get a book. Look at this. It's all about this book. Published in 1956. Many editions of this book. Look at that. All kinds of articles, and it goes on pages and pages and pages. So the full title was When Prophecy Fails, a social and psychological study of a modern group that predicted the destruction of the world. It's a classic book on the social psychology of a group whose prophecies or whose expectations did not come about. Leon Festinger is the first author. He's usually the one most cited, but we don't want to forget Henry Rieken and Stanley Schachter. It was published in 1956, and it does a very thorough study of a small Chicago-based religious group, UFO-oriented in the 1950s. Remember, that's the height of the Cold War with atomic threats and so forth. And they call themselves the Seekers. It's a book well worth reading. It's an amazing book to read, and I do recommend it. But that's where that phrase really began to get popular and get picked up by people at all kinds of levels when prophecy fails. So let me jump to another screen because I want to point out, I'm going to review that book on my new feature here on my blog. This is jamestabor.com, Tabor Bookshelf. Let me click on that. Just bear with me here. I'll get to the series, but I want to show you some things here that I think will be of interest to you. This is a new section of my blog where I'm going to review books, and I want all of you to know about it and visit it. I think you'll find it useful. To get on this list, a book needs to be a book I own, a book I've read, and a book I treasure and value and would want to keep. I've got thousands of books. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them all eventually. But this list is going to be in the hundreds, not the multiple thousands. My highly recommended books. And I've already begun to populate it. And I'm going to put Fessinger's book on this probably this week or into next week, because I want any of you who follow this series to be well aware of that book and maybe purchase the book. So Tabor Bookshelf. Now, while I'm here, bear with me. The Jewish World of Jesus, I keep populating that. This is all the material from my classes broken into these 6 categories. You can click on any of these and you can get downloads, free PDFs, all kinds of things that you can study. It's endless. It's thousands of pages when I get it all up there, free of charge. These are the notes and different resources that I use for 40 years teaching at 3 different universities. This is publications and papers. I haven't got them all scanned yet, but I'm slowly scanning all of my published articles. I did list my academic books here, just like I did on the other website. Hey, a man's got to recommend his books, right? And by the way, the Jesus Dynasty does deal primarily with Jesus as an apocalyptic prophet of the end of the age. That's what the book's about. And in fact, I dedicate it to Albert Schweitzer, who pioneered that particular view of Jesus that I share and that many of my colleagues share. This book, Paul and Jesus, presents Paul as apocalyptic par excellence, and a prophet, and a seer, and an interpreter of Bible prophecy. And all of the interpretations failed of Paul, and I would say of Jesus as well, or at least what's reported that Jesus said, because we can't always be sure how much Jesus said. This book on Paul deals with some of the same, but in a much broader way. And so even though I've got my books headlined here, it is relevant to what we're talking about in this new series. Anyway, as you go down, you're going to see a lot of these articles have to do with the topic. Look at this. Are You the One? The Textual Dynamics of Messianic Self-Identity. Apocalyptic Schemes and Dreams. How an Ancient Jewish Vision of the Future Came to Dominate the World. Y2K, remember? This is Y2K, the biblical roots of millennialism. On and on it goes. So look, if I describe myself broadly as a scholar, ancient Mediterranean religions, and then I focus in on ancient Judaism and earliest Christianity, Judaism in the late Second Temple period. To be a little broader, I've sometimes tagged myself chronologically as from the Maccabees, that would be 2nd century BCE, to the Mishnah, early 3rd century CE. I want to deal with everything in that period. Now, that's going to include the Dead Sea Scrolls, the rise of Christianity. It will include other Jewish movements of the time, all the way down to the time of Hadrian, which is into the 2nd century AD or CE, when Bar Kokhba was believed by many to be the Messiah. And so that's the period I work on. So what is this? These are PDFs. They're not all scanned yet, but you can download them, print them out. They're free of charge. I ask that you not post them or circulate them, but you can post the links if you would like to, because some of them are articles and books and chapters and journals and so forth. And I don't want to get into any kind of trouble there. But hey, nothing wrong with reading. Most of us now are putting ourselves on academia.edu. If you've not tried that website, you can follow most of the scholars you know by name in my field, and really every field, but my field in particular, I'm familiar with who's there. Academia.edu. Okay. So let me just clear my screen here and go back. Publications and papers. Please, if you haven't, sign up for notifications. I post several times a week on the blog. I'm going to go back to the homepage where you can see how it looks. You can see what I've just done lately. And also this newsletter. I'm going to send it out this week. I usually do it the middle of the month. subscribe to the free newsletter. No obligation. I never share emails, and you'll be able to keep up with a lot of what I do. So let me go back to my notes here that I made. If you start thinking about when prophecy fails, as well as why prophecy fails, probably I would start with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I will do that in this new series. I certainly will start with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I wanted to mention that I have a new course coming out dealing with the Dead Sea Scrolls. It'll be distributed by Myth Vision Courses. Many of you took my Mark course. And in fact, I might just mention this is the last month to be part of the Zoom meetings on the Mark course that'll be held the last weekend of August. So if you didn't take the Mark course, but you're interested in it, you can look at the description of any of my videos on YouTube, and I put the link in. But the new course is called Jesus and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we will thoroughly explore the question of the Dead Sea Scrolls and Jesus. So it relates to this series, but it's an actual course that you would take. I also want to mention another related item. If I go here, Bart Ehrman is sponsoring September 23rd and 24th this year, coming up for 2 days, 10 a.m. to 5:30, a conference. It's called New Insights into the New Testament. And here's a video you can play on your own and listen to. And here are the speakers. You'll know some of these names. You've got a lineup here of 10 speakers. My topic, I think the topics are given down here, does relate to this series. It just so happens. I didn't plan it that way. But my topic is moving the goalposts, Mark's, quote, sign of the end as a failed prophecy. So I will deal there with why prophecy fails in the case of this particular text. So Dead Sea Scrolls, Mark 13 is called the Jesus Apocalypse. Paul, I've already mentioned in connection with my book. We'll do a bit on Paul, the book of Revelation, the Montanists from the 2nd century CE, late 2nd century, a few of the church fathers. Then I want to talk some about what happens during the millennial period of around 1000 to 1200 CE. Many Christians believed, and there were movements galore talking about as you approach the final millennium, if the church was the millennial kingdom, as Augustine taught, then at the end of 1,000 years, basically, to be exact, probably the year 1030, because Jesus died in 30 and the church was established, you had 1,000 years. But of course, what they most expected to happen didn't happen. You know, predicting the end of the age so far has a 100% failure rate. And I mention that often, not to be cynical, but to be realistic. So this book, a book again, Norman Cohen, The Pursuit of the Millennium, and I'll put this up on my bookshelf as well. This is a revised edition I would recommend. And let's see, this was published, let me look down here. It might not say when it was originally published. No, it's been updated in the 1970s, but you can get older editions. Anyway, it's a really classic book, The Pursuit of the Millennium, and it has to do with the Middle Ages and all the traditions in the Middle Ages where people were predicting the time of the end. Here's a little preview of it. 1957, so there. 1956, When Prophecy Fails, Pursuit of the Millennium, 1957. Highly recommend both books. I'll put them on my bookshelf. Now, in our own time, I've dealt with a number of things. Here's my YouTube channel. Please bear with me if I stray away here, but I want to invite you to subscribe. I'm getting up to 45,000. I'd like to hit the big 50. Maybe I can do it today when I release this. Why do I want more subscribers? Because it just so happens that YouTube prioritizes success. So success breeds success. So the more subscribers, the more views, the more my videos are going to get recommended. And I just think I have some pretty amazing material. Got over 200 videos. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. But look on down. Here's the series I just completed. If you didn't know about it, Death and Afterlife in the Ancient World. And you can take a look at that. And this new series will be put right here, Why Prophecy Fails. Here's something, The Perils of Predicting the End, Part 2. And here's The Perils of Predicting the End, Part 1. This is very, very important. It'll come up in the new series, Why Prophecy Fails. It has to do with a time that came in my generation where we could begin to talk about Jerusalem in a literal, not a symbolic way, meaning Jerusalem today in the land of Israel, the ancient Holy Land. So let me get out of that. But I've also got ancient apocalyptic texts and ideas. So here's this playlist, some of the same things, but also some things that are different. Here's When Prophecy Fails, I use that title, How Ancient Messianic Jews and Christians Survived Apocalyptic Disappointment. That's dealing more with the when. What do people do when it fails? How do they cope? Do they throw it out the window, flush it down the toilet, forget it? Do they reinterpret? Do they come up with an explanation as to why it really did happen when it didn't? Believe it or not, that's one of the most common strategies. This is about the book of Revelation. I believe there's a pre-Christian version of the book of Revelation, and we can recover it. Here's an interesting question. Were Jesus and his first followers wrong about the end of the age? I say yes. So for now, I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to come back in just a minute and show you one more thing. So I will go into every aspect of this in this series in a survey kind of way, just like I did with Death and Afterlife Ideas in the Ancient World. In our own time, it's a heyday of apocalypticism. You talk about the third millennium, it is huge. But if you look back even 150 years, we've got America is just the mecca of apocalyptic craziness. We've got William Miller, 1843-44, led to the Seventh-day Adventists. I want to cover that. Charles Taz Russell, which developed eventually the Bible students, he called them, into the Jehovah's Witnesses. He published a famous tract, Millions Now Living Will Never Die. He set several dates. One of them was 1914 for the coming of Jesus. Later, it was reinterpreted as the invisible coming of Jesus, not the literal coming. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are still very active today. In fact, they're growing more than ever, even with apocalyptic failure. Any of you remember Herbert W. Armstrong, The World Tomorrow? I think he was on more radio and later TV stations than any single religious broadcaster in his time. Started in the 30s, really picked up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. The movement's pretty well died out now because the Worldwide Church of God that Herbert Armstrong founded has given up a lot of that material and changed a lot of its doctrines. Although there are plenty of people out there who still essentially follow the things that Herbert Armstrong interpreted. You can imagine in the 1940s with Adolf Hitler, how things were just up to a boiling point. As I say, apocalypticism on the front burner, turned on high in the 1940s. What better Antichrist than Adolf Hitler? Then in the 1970s, Hal Lindsey, The Late Great Planet Earth. I think it was the bestseller of the decade. Any of you remember that or read that? It's still worth reading. It was very influential and still is today in its fundamental ideas about Christian evangelical interpretations of Bible prophecy. If you've heard of Left Behind, either the movie or the series or the books, the idea of the secret rapture, this stuff is out now commonly known in the public, and millions of believing Christians are following this and watching world news and reading Bible prophecy with different interpretations of what it all means. And we will also cover that. And we will dip a little bit into YouTube today. I'll pick some of the craziest and some of the more responsible material, not to make fun of, but just to show the range of material. Everything from the mark of the beast, when is the world going to end, biblical chronology, trying to calculate the time of the end, and so forth. But in this series, I want to deal with the why, as I said. Let me give you an example. What is one of the main beliefs of Christians? I've heard this all my life growing up. I was raised an evangelical Christian in the Churches of Christ. Some of you might be familiar with that Stone Campbell movement, we call it, in the American Restoration Movement. It was amillennial, so they weren't much into Bible prophecy. They thought, like Augustine, the church father, that the church was the kingdom. But I did get indoctrinated very heavily on this idea that Jesus fulfilled hundreds and hundreds of messianic prophecies in the Hebrew Bible. And many times people will write me today and say, Dr. Tabor, can't you believe in Jesus? Did you know that there's verified fulfillments of over 150 prophecies that he directly fulfilled? And my answer would be, no, I don't know that. And again, let me just say something. This is kind of stark, but trust me, I can back it up. There are only 10 basic texts in the Hebrew Bible that deal with the coming of a future ideal Davidic king. Only 10, not hundreds, not thousands, 10. Okay. And I'm going to go through all 10. And of these 10 messianic prophecies, the descendant of David, who's supposed to rule and reign over all Israel and really over all the world in some of the texts. Did you know he's never called the Messiah? So people talk to the Messiah is Jesus the Messiah. Dr. Tabor, do you think Jesus is the Messiah? You're using a term that these 10 texts don't even use. And also, I'm going to say, ready? Neither Jesus nor any other claimant in history has fulfilled any of the 10 prophecies. I'm going to say it again. I know that could be seen as overdramatic, but stay tuned. Neither Jesus nor any other claimant in history has fulfilled any of the 10 messianic prophecies about a Davidic ruler. Now, whether Jesus fulfilled anything else is another question. But in terms of these 10 major prophecies of the Davidic figure, and Bar Kokhba didn't either, nor any of the other dozen messiahs that Josephus mentions in his works from his time in the late Second Temple period. And neither did the teacher of righteousness or anyone in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and nobody through history who's ever claimed to be the Davidic figure, Jewish or Christian or neo-Christian, has fulfilled those things. There's the book of Daniel, there's the book of Revelation that are at the core of the matter, but there are other books I want to look at. This is a survey, and we're just going to have to take an overview, but it'll introduce you to the material so that you can study it more yourself. Let me share my screen again. Here's a text that you may not be aware of, and I called it up. Let's see, I used ebible.org, which is useful. It's called Second Esdras, and Second Esdras is a text usually called the Apocrypha text. It's between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, these texts, and this is one of the great ones that's been overlooked. If you have a Bible with the Apocrypha, as I do here, and many study Bibles have the Apocrypha, but you can find it here online, this book is really worth reading because it is a kind of a redo of Daniel. So, and then the book of Revelation is a redo of this, which is a redo of Daniel. So we're going to get into that. It's just so fascinating as you go along. But I wanted to call your attention to chapter 12, verse 10. After the seer or the viewer who claims to be Ezra, he sees all of these things, the lion and the eagle and these different beasts. If you know the book of Revelation, you got to count your beast and count the heads on the beast and the horns of the beast and so forth. But look at this. This just blows me away. He's being told the meaning of the prophecy by the Lord. O sovereign Lord, if I'm worthy, tell me. And he said to me, this is the interpretation of the vision which you saw. You got to go read this. The eagle whom you saw come up from the sea is the fourth kingdom, which appeared in a vision to your brother Daniel. Yes, it did, Daniel 7. And we're going to go over that in detail when we get into this series. But look at this. But it was not explained to him as I now explain it to you, or have explained it. Wow. Do you realize what this text is saying? In Daniel 7, an angel reveals to Daniel the true meaning of the vision and dream that he had. And it's coming from God, the revelation of what it means. And now this text says, well, I'm going to give you an explanation, but it won't be the one that Daniel got. Almost like God has revised his interpretation of prophecy. So that raises a really interesting question. Does God revise his interpretations of prophecy? Unless you think that I'm being kind of silly or sarcastic or cynical here, let me tell you, if you don't know this, you'll find it very interesting, I think, that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Habakkuk Pesher, it's called, it's a commentary, a prophetic commentary on the book of Habakkuk. It does say, in fact, that God changes prophecy and changes fulfillment and delays, in quotes, according to our view, certain things that are supposed to come and they don't come. But to him, it's not really delay. And the New Testament, 2 Peter, says the same thing, because prophecies are failing at the end of the New Testament. And everybody's throwing their hands up. Paul had said, we who are alive and remain at the coming of the Lord will rise to meet him in the air. And of course, Paul died, possibly in Rome, as a martyr. And Peter, expecting the end. I don't think Peter wrote 2 Peter, but it's in his name. And now he is saying in his second epistle, or whoever wrote it in his name, look, God is faithful. God is not slack concerning his promises. Even if it seems like it's been delayed, a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. So all of a sudden, you expand the rubber band, I call it, the elasticity of prophecy, and you've had a peg here, or I also call it moving the goalpost, and you now stretch the rubber band right here, and it covers. It hasn't broken yet. It hadn't snapped. But what about when you pull it all the way back here and it snaps? Because that also happens. So this is just a brief overview. I hope to tantalize you a little bit to follow this series. I'll do the first one just in a few days here, still this week, and we'll get it kicked off. Subscribe to the blog, please. Sign up for notifications. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Sign up for Bart Ehrman's seminar coming up. That's going to be really good. And also the course that I'm going to put out early September. Be watching for that. Jesus and the Dead Sea Scrolls. It'll be everywhere. I will announce it. You won't miss it if you follow what I do. And I'm going to announce this week in my newsletter the tour that I'm going to do of Israel in May of 2024. It's called Tracking Jesus. It's a historical and archaeological tour, not a typical devotional Holy Land tour. You can be as devoted as you want. I feel I'm very devoted. I spent 40 years on this material. But what I mean is, it's for people who don't believe the Bible, who believe the Bible, who come from a Christian background, a Jewish background, any religion, as long as you have a hunger and a thirst and a curiosity about the historical figure of Jesus, we're going to go over to the land of Israel, to the Holy Land, and we're going to track Jesus on the ground and under the ground. So I'll be announcing that this week. Take care, everybody.